I'm Joe Pardavila, and you're listening to the Forbes Books podcast. And for years, corporate profits and corporate responsibility were mutually exclusive propositions. But as Bob Dylan once sang, the times, they are a-Changin'. And now businesses that do good, do well. So how do you get better at doing good? My guest this week is Phil Haid. He's the co-founder and CEO of Public, a Toronto-based cause marketing agency and incubator that believes profit and profit should go hand in hand. Hey, Phil, welcome to the studio.
Thanks so much. Great to be here.
So, Phil, you've been doing what I call purpose-driven work before it was cool. You started the company in 2008, but it wasn't until 2020 when a majority of companies finally embraced the importance of their social impact. What did you see in 2008 that people saw 12 years later?
You know what? It started because I was doing, CSR in the early days of CSR, where it was essentially companies doing nice things to give back to the community. And so I started developing those strategies probably in 2000.
Okay.
And it was super fun. And it was like, wow, companies could actually do something meaningful. And I was very much, before that thinking about governing a nonprofit. But what happened by about 2004 was I started to say, you know what, it's not adding up to enough. Because, and I'll tell you a very quick story. I was working with a bank. I won't name the bank, but I was working with a bank, and we created this whole program for them, and it was like super successful. And so at the end, when we were recapping with the client, I said, okay, so next year we should double down, right? And assuming that she was going to say, of course. And she's like, oh, no, we can't do that. I said, what do you mean you can't do that? And she said, well, we don't have the budget for it. I said, but we've just shown it works. We've reached so many more people. Okay? Couldn't do it. And so for me, the penny dropped. And I said, okay, this doesn't work because it's an expense to the business. It's not driving the profit motive. So at probably around 2004 is when I started to realize this model isn't going to get us to where we need to. And if we truly believe that business can be actually a force for good and solve problems in the world, then we got to take a different approach. And that's when I started to see it. Now, look, there were proof points, right? You had Body Shop, you had Ben & Jerry's, they already existed, right? But most companies didn't see it. So I saw that opportunity in the market and thought, I've got to create a company around that.
Wow. And so that gap between 2000 and 2008, did people think you were nuts?
You know what? I got a lot of, that's interesting, with basically saying, what the hell's the matter with you? When I launched the company in 2008, I got 3 responses from senior execs. I had the response of, I don't think that's right, because they looked at it through this charitable philanthropic lens and just thought, nope, I should not be profiting from it, because we have this mantra, profit with purpose. I had other people who said, that's really intriguing. It's amazing that you're thinking about this, but that's a nice to do. Like that, well, I'm not being measured on that. It's not a need to do. And then I had others who really liked it, but thought I could never say publicly that we're benefiting from it.
Right.
And so it was just a lot of resistance, and it took years, just chipping away until the market started to catch up.
Wow. And when people were afraid to, it's almost like puff out their chest. And you being a Canadian,
yep.
One thing I've noticed is that a lot of Canadians have what they have in the UK and Australia, but tall poppy syndrome, where you're not, and you laugh as I said this because you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But Americans don't get this.
No.
Like they do not understand, wait a minute, we're not supposed to say how good we are? I'm like, a lot of the rest of the planet is like that.
Yeah.
So was that sort of something you were battling as well, sort of this tall poppy syndrome, where essentially the nuts and bolts of it is like you're really not supposed to show off because people will think you're a bit of a blowhard.
Yeah.
So how do you thread that needle in Canada?
So we were actually doing work in the U.S. as well, but
Okay.
even there was still resistance in the U.S. But yeah, in Canada, it was about trying to make the case. The argument I kept making was, don't think of this as charity. Don't think of this as philanthropy. Not because those aren't good things. What I'm talking about is this is actually important for your business, right? So I was trying to make that argument, but the problem is until the market has come around to an idea, you're asking people to take a jump, take a leap. And so it wasn't even about, you can look great doing it, because I knew that wouldn't resonate. And I say actually in meetings often to Canadians, clients, don't be too Canadian, right? I actually say to them, please, like our skins are thick. If you don't like what we've come up with, go for it. But Canadians are very polite, and they say sorry for everything. But actually similar in the US, I had a lot of resistance because the market wasn't ready and people just didn't believe social environmental impact was a business strategy. It came on the environmental side before the social side,
Right.
but it's only locked in, I would say, in the last couple of years during COVID.
Yeah. Does it get weird that it gets clumped together, the environmental and social governance? I mean, I feel like it's such a big, broad area, and it's so difficult because, like you said, the environmental side is like, okay, cool, climate change, clean energy, all that stuff, that makes sense. But then to clump that in with social governance, why do you think they are combined, or should they be almost like separated in certain aspects?
Yeah, it's such a great question, because ESG is now the big buzzword.
Yeah.
And as you know, it came from the investing side, right? It was a lens to look at investing. Now it's just being used as how every company does their ESG, and now we're being asked to develop ESG brands. It's really imperfect is the true answer. It's really, really imperfect, because you're right. What's good about it is it connects all of the things you're doing to create societal impact, positive societal. So if you buy into the idea, like Paul Pullman talks about, of sort of a net positive economy, a net positive company, then you actually have to look at your governance, your environment, and your social. But it's big, broad categories. So you have to start to get granular about, well, what does that really mean? The trick is, how do you connect those things? And that's what we're all trying to figure out. And that's what we actually do a lot of work with companies, is let's actually find that through line, that connective tissue between why you're doing these environmental targets, what you're doing from a social, and then what you're doing from a governance.
So I'd love to unpack a little bit here about your history. So talk to me about Phil Haid coming up with this concept, making a business, running it for many years. So from 2000, 2008, you build it, and then 2008 to 2020, that's about 12 more years, so about 20 in total. What is life like for Phil Haid during those first 20 years and now in the last 2 years?
Yeah.
It must be like a world of difference.
Oh my gosh. It's so I joke with people. I say, well, I probably shouldn't even joke. I say, if I look the way I do, it's because I hit my head against the wall so many times in the early years. And so it's good that we're doing this and we're talking as opposed to seeing the visual here. But it's night and day. So in the early years, so we launched the company in 2008. No exaggeration, I had 4 sort of friendly impact investors. I closed 2 weeks after Lehman Brothers collapsed.
Oh boy. Perfect timing.
Yeah, it was great. I went home and I said to my wife, so the good news is we close, and the bad news is we close. I'm the schmuck who starts a profit with purpose business in 2008. So real smart. But it was really hard. It was so hard. And also because I didn't have a big brand, a big name that people recognized. And so it was just chipping away. And it really does test how much do you believe something. And it's the optimist in me, but also the belief that this is the way the world has to go. So it took a long time. Fast forward to now, it's amazing. I feel like a kid in a candy store now, because now it's locked in, right? With COVID and then the sort of racial, reawakening after the murder of George Floyd, it has locked in. Now it's a need to do. It's no longer a nice to do. And so, of course, I said to somebody said to me a couple of weeks ago, they're like, oh, you're in the right place at the right time. I said, actually, I was in the wrong place, the wrong time for so long. Now we're in the right spot. So I feel like this is just the end of the beginning.
Interesting.
And it's a new chapter coming in. It's so exciting, a great team, and the work is hard, but it's fascinating and it's motivating, and so I feel really privileged.
I always like to use metaphors because I'm a big movie junkie. So you are sort of the overnight success over 20 years, right? When you always hear about these actors, like all of a sudden he's a superstar. I'm like, no, he was grinding out, or she was grinding it out as a waitress or a waiter somewhere, and then all of a sudden they become a movie star. That's how you are. You've become this overnight success over 20 years.
It's taken a long time. Absolutely. But it's good, because anything worth doing is hard, right? And so it really tests how badly do you believe something, how much do you want it. And so, I learned so many good lessons as a result, but it's nice to now be riding the wave.
Yeah, absolutely.
As opposed to waiting for the wave.
Just sitting there like, where's the wave,
right,
man?
It's going to come. And people would ask, I'm like, oh, it's coming. 3 years from now, you'll see. And I'm like, nope, I was wrong on that one. It's 5 years. But, since 2000, so the company official will be 14 years old in October, and it really feels like now we got the wind at our sails.
Now, you're probably too polite to tell people I told you so, but have you had those people that closed doors on you years ago now coming out of the woodwork and be like, hey, Phil, remember that thing we talked about? Whoa. Has that come up?
You know what? I'm not a big I told you so kind of guy.
Of course not. I know you're not.
What's actually kind of nice, because I do have a healthy ego, so I won't pretend otherwise, but what's nice is that a lot of people say, oh, wow, you've been at it for a long time. And it actually helps, because they know that it's not just jumping onto the latest fad, right? It's like trying to seize this and, oh, there's a money opportunity. They know we've been at it for a long time. And so that actually works in our favor.
Excellent. And, we joked about the Canadianness of you and your company, but you guys produced a video called It's Effing Water.
Yeah.
Which is very un-Canadian.
Yes.
Can you tell folks about that project and what it's all about?
Yeah, you bet. Well, actually, and it was a sequel. So the first one, and I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this or not.
Go for it.
But the first one we did was actually at the end of 2020, and it was called It's Fucking 2020. And so we did a spot that we created to essentially, and we raised money for the Mental Health Coalition. And the whole was to basically say what a god awful year this was. and it totally hit. I mean, we put zero media behind it, and we had millions upon millions of views on it, and we raised about $50,000 in a week, so we were happy about that. And so that one took off, and so we decided we're going to do the sequel, and we wanted to pick a different issue. And in Canada, we have a terrible track record in history with Indigenous peoples. Canadians love to think that they're so kind and good, and it is true, but it's also not true. And our history of colonialism and how we've treated Indigenous is horrific. And so really inspired by this guy by the name of Guy Friedman and First Peoples Group, we thought, we've done this whole reconciliation happening in Canada. So we said, we need to do reconciliation. What could we as an agency do? And so we decided to tackle the issue of clean water. There was all these clean, drinking water advisories. There's still it's gotten much better in the last year, but over 30 communities across Canada where they don't have clean drinking water.
Wow.
And we said, that's fucking ridiculous. It's 2022. How can that be? And so the sequel to FU 2020 was this effing water. And it was we got to call attention to this issue.
Wow. So I guess America and Canada are very similar. We both treat Indigenous people really horribly.
That's right.
Wow. I did not know that
We're
about
just
Canada.
a little bit more smug about it. Canadians love to think and look, I'm a proud Canadian.
Sure.
I work in both countries, but we have lots of the same problems that you have in the U.S. And I think we need to be a bit more honest about the underbelly of some of the social issues that we have not tackled in our country.
All right, so let's get some of the work you're doing. So the book you're working on, The Path to Purpose.
Yes.
I always ask this question, and a lot of authors, it's always tough to answer. So why a book? There's so many things you can do.
Yeah.
A book seems like a lot of work.
Yes.
Why would you want to do that?
Yeah, you know what? So it comes out of a presentation that I put together. I got asked by, I think the first one was Danone, or Danone, as you guys say in the US.
Yes.
The yogurt company and food company. And it was for their executive team. And it was trying to educate them about what's happening in the market. And then I've subsequently given that presentation to the executive team at Tiffany, and I've given it to a whole bunch of companies. And it resonates, and it's had a real positive impact because it really shows people not just why are we sort of shifting to purpose and the importance of purpose as a company, but more importantly, what are the ingredients, what are the principles to do it well? And so I've given this presentation, and it's gone over really well. And so the thinking was, well, why not actually put it in book form so you can reach so many more people? Because if this can help shift, whether you want to talk about conscious capitalism, stakeholder capitalism, pick your term. But if this book can help in some small way to accelerate companies recognizing that they need to be much sharper on their purpose and then understand what it takes to do it well, like putting your people first, like taking a stand on issues, like innovating with your products, like thinking about creative ways to engage people to be part of the solution, not just making them aware of it. If I can use those principles and people are excited by it inside companies, I think we can get scalable impact. And the whole reason I started Public and our whole purpose as a company is to accelerate change in society. So it just seemed like a great vehicle to do it.
Interesting. And you've been grinding for a while, as we've joked. Why do you think that presentation hit? Why do you think that was the one? It's again, using showbiz terms, you have musical artists putting out music for years, then all of a sudden, 10 years later, they have their big hit song. Why do you think that was your breakout hit?
I think it's because there are very tangible ingredients or principles that people will understand. But importantly, it's not just about sort of the theoretical, everyone knows you should take care of your people, right? But we're seeing it in a very different way today than we did even 2 or 3 years ago. But the critical part is, what does that look like? And so the core of this book and the core of the presentation is showing and showcasing all kinds of great examples. So it's meant to be a bit of a dizzying array of wow, look at all these companies doing stuff. And so I think that's why it hits, is that you can, if you're sort of realizing you need to do better and you're not sure how, to be able to understand how to do it and then look at all these different companies, mostly consumer-facing companies, to feel inspired and to realize you can do it in your own company. I think that's why it's tangible, but it's also inspirational.
Interesting. And so what do you say to the business owner, small business, medium-sized businesses, like, yeah, Phil, that's Danone or Denim.
Yeah.
That's Tiffany.
Right.
These are major companies. These teams have millions of dollars of budgets for marketing and advertising. I'm a small business. I'm a medium-sized business. I got 100 employees. How can I do any of this?
Right. And that question comes up a lot. And the answer is always the same, which is, this is true if you're a company of 10 people or if you're a company of 100,000 people. It doesn't matter. Everything in between. And the reason is that these principles, you don't have to do all of them. But if you just take that example of people, if you're not thinking about how you really take care of your people, you're not going to grow, right? If you're not thinking about, so it's not all about money. It's actually about how you behave. And so it starts with a purpose. Oftentimes when you're in startup mode, and I know this from way back when I started my company, you're thinking, your head's down, you're going, you're putting in your 15, 18-hour days. But the truth is, when you think about what you're trying to create, to start at the beginning about, well, why do I exist, right? And how does that positively impact on all my key stakeholders? It doesn't matter what stage of business you're in. You should be asking yourself those questions, because your customers, your employees, your clients, and your other partners, they're all asking those questions too.
And let's give a plug to the company. We kind of danced around a little bit about it during our conversation. Public. I know it's called a cause marketing agency, which is cool little handle there. But exactly what do you do? How do you help these companies?
Yeah, so we're part of this thing called the B Corp movement. So we're Business as a Force for Good. And we really are a hybrid of a impact consultancy and creative agency. So we, think advertising, think marketing agency, but only for helping companies and nonprofits really accelerate change. So it's all about defining your purpose, creating community impact programs, creating campaigns, and marketing your ESG now, or your sustainability. So we do it from strategy all the way to creative execution.
Excellent. And lastly, Phil, I'm not a very religious person, but I always feel like we're all here for a purpose. What is Phil Haid's purpose?
I think it's about inspiring change in the world. I joked with somebody recently. They called me a do-gooder. And I said, I'm not actually a do-gooder. If I was passionate about cars, I'd be working in the auto industry, right? It just so happens that I really believe in public service. It's sort of just in my DNA. And so for me, I'm always looking for the vehicle to try to help make the world a better place. As cliche as that sounds, it's about accelerating change and really thinking about ways to make the planet and people better in small ways and big ways.
That's awesome. He is Phil Haid. He's an overnight success, 20 years in the making, the co-founder and CEO of Public. Phil, thanks for stopping by.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome, and that's it for this episode of the Forbes Books Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you take a quick second to subscribe so you automatically get new shows when they drop. Also, if you have a minute, I'd love if you left us a review so more amazing entrepreneurs like yourself can discover the show. And please don't forget the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.